You were talking earlier about localizing production within the United States, but hey, why not within your closet? I mean, that would be great.
Hey, Erum, what's going on?
Hey, Karl. We have been at Synbiobeta all week long, and today we decided to do a replay of our Synbiobeta 2024 recap. So for people who are time sensitive, this is the year 2025. So we will be playing the recap of 2024. And why are we doing that? Well, we need to take a little break because we've been prepping for Synbiobeta the past few weeks. We've attended. We're gathering insights, we're gathering guests, so very busy on this side of the world. But there are other reasons we wanted to do this replay of the recap of Synbiobeta 2024. And why is that, Karl?
Well, we're also going to do a recap of 2025 when we get a chance to. But like you said, we've been super busy, not just with prepping to go to the conference, but also other work that we've done. And for listeners of the Grow Everything podcast, you probably heard our orchestration episode, and we'll be talking about how we implemented some of those things while we were attending Synbiobeta 2025 in our Synbiobeta 2025 recap episode.
That's right. That's right. It's been incredible connecting with all the people in the industry, new people, people that we've met, old friends that we've known for a while, of course, previous guests and future guests. And there were a lot of cool events, some that we missed. We missed the Biopunk event. What was that about, Karl?
So our friend Elliot Roth, who's been on the podcast, who previously was running a company called Spira, but has gone down to Vitali in Honduras, set up their lab space, and is now setting up a project called the Biopunk Lab in a building on Market Street in San Francisco. And it's a 12 or 16 story village that is focused on frontier technology, so deep tech and emerging tech. And it's exciting that he's going to be running the lab space there, which feels like a temporary autonomous zone or nation state. So Elliot, who's a mover and shaker, set up this Biopunk event, which probably when we talk about the recap, we'll be able to talk to a little bit more. But it was like an alternative to Synbiobeta or an alternative to iGEM. These events can be costly, and there's so many people that are trying to learn about biotechnology and its impact. Here in Brooklyn, we're lucky we've got GenSpace that makes it very accessible for people who are interested in. San Francisco has BioCurious. There's also an open plant lab that's opening up for people. But the Biopunk event, which preceded the Synbiobeta event, was a way to get biohackers together, people interested in biotech, and have them all go to an event and get to know each other.
Yeah, we should have him on for sure. And we'll certainly dig deeper into all of the exciting things that we've seen and learned at Synbiobeta. But what else has been going on, Karl? I know you've been connecting with people ahead of Synbiobeta. Some people have been reaching out to you. Tell us what's been up.
So first, I want to do a shout out to my dad, who at the time of this recording just turned 93.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And my dad's in great shape. He's still mischievous, has a great sense of humor. So I'm happy that Albert is around and that we can celebrate his birthday. In terms of reaching out to people, part of our meeting strategy, if you want to go back and listen to our meeting episodes here on Grow Everything, you'll hear us talking about pre-meetings. And so one of the things that we do is we'll go through the list of people who are attending or people who are speaking that we're interested in talking to, and we'll reach out to them either via LinkedIn or via email or ask someone for an introduction, just so that when we actually meet them in person, it's not a total cold intro, which is something we still do anyway. It is a bit of a power move, but we also understand that it's not easy. But something really interesting that happened is that I got an invite from someone on LinkedIn 13 years after I had reached out to him.
Wow.
Yeah, this guy, Tiger Buford, he runs a community for medical device professionals or medical device entrepreneurs. And he reached out to me and he said, hey, you might be interested in joining our community. It's called Bone Chat. And the reason he reached out to me was that about 13 years ago, maybe even more, I was thinking about starting a medical device company because I had been hanging around a lot with a guy who was a veteran of that industry and had done something like 20 startups. So anyway, shout out to Tiger Buford for not forgetting me
Wow.
13 years later, reaching out and telling me that he's a listener of the Grow Everything podcast. So I think we should mention him because it is a power move to go back through your email box, find emails from 5-10 years ago that maybe you'd never answered and answer them as if you're just continuing the conversation.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, you are unforgettable, clearly. Yeah, that is a power move. I mean, I've had people reach out to me. I know you have too. We have some graduate students reaching out, people, first timers going to Synbiobeta. So it's been great to receive all of that inbound, I guess you can say, in sales speak. But this isn't about sales. This is about growing a community of people. So I really want to thank people that have been reaching out to trust us, to reach out and ask to meet up. So we have a lot of new people to meet with. But that's cool. I mean, medical devices, Karl, that would have been another life. That would have been another life.
Definitely would have been another life.
Yes, but we do have clients in that space, so it's great to be a part of that community. But medical devices are going to get very crazy. Have you seen the latest season of Black Mirror?
Well, I saw the very first one, but I couldn't watch it all the way through. I ran out of time and I was tired. And then I watched the Hotel Reverie, which I thought was really good. Have you binge watched them all?
Well, I haven't binge watched them, but I have watched a few, and not all of them, but the one that stood out to me, it's called Plaything. There's just a convergence of so much technology, and I love the fact that it's set in the, I think, late 80s, so there's a little bit of that nostalgia, which is perfect for elder millennials like me. So that caught my attention. But there was this whole narrative about functional music or functional sounds that can impact the way humans think. And it's AI that's creating these sounds. And there's also a narrative of creating a digital living being and how that evolves. And it kind of reminded me of Tamagotchi. An egg cracks and you have this little character and you have to feed it. But it's not just computer code. It is like AI, which is computer code, but this is self-learning, more autonomous, but it's manifested in the video game. So it was really cool to see how it was communicating with humans and how it was then able to really have an impact in the physical world. And I'm like, wow. I think there's this controversy like AI is going to take over the world or they're going to dominate us. But there's also kind of a question mark. It's like, how are they going to get out of the computer? And
Right.
how are they going to take over? Are they going to just infiltrate robots? Or are there other ways to get to humans? And so this episode, I think I've done a good job of not giving away too much. But if you watch this episode, again, called Plaything on Black Mirror, wow, I was just blown away. And then it got me thinking, I know Black Mirror is always about, oh my God, the negative effects, the devastating things that are happening because of advancements in technology. Yes, there's that. But then you also have to look at the flip side. I mean, if the Black Mirror, maybe the clear mirror or white mirror, or we'll say purple mirror because I hate the white and black combo. I don't want to do that. But it's like, okay, wait. So yeah, how can we use music to help us maybe think better, relieve depression, get us motivated? And I know we do that with current music. You have your soundtrack that you work out to, but is there another level that can help influence the way that our biology works, biological pathways because of sound, vibration, and what that entails? There's also the binaural beats. That's functional music, but I know there's people that are working on this, but how music can influence biology is something that if there's any experts out there, I know a couple, we'll have to bring them on the podcast.
Yeah, I've heard there's a really good book I've never read that's about the impact of music on the brain. It's been in my reading list forever. And I've seen people on YouTube, and maybe I should look and see if I can link this to the notes, talk about how these binaural beats that were developed in the 50s or 60s, these guys are taking novel technology to amplify them, to synchronize your different sides of your brain, get certain neurons firing, increase relaxation or increase creativity. So I think it's a very interesting area. And yeah, we should definitely have someone come on and talk about it because it's fascinating. I know I put on brown noise to tune out the world when I try to get in the zone, work zone, but other people do different things. So I think it'd be worth it to find someone to come on and talk about it.
Yeah, there's the whole idea of like mind control, which is something you'll see in the Black Mirror episode. But if you can play music in public spaces, That's the Black Mirror things. What happens if you have functional music or audio that can influence you and have a negative effect on you? And there was no consent. It was just playing. And then all of a sudden, and maybe we're being controlled now. I don't know. Maybe there's some type of audio that we can't hear because our hearing is in a limited part of the audio wavelength spectrum. So I don't know. Maybe we're all being controlled right now. Let's get the tinfoil hats.
There's all sorts of this stuff going on. There's sonic cannons that have been developed for crowd control. And there's music that used to be played in shopping malls that has subliminal messages in it, like don't steal or don't shoplift. So there's a lot of this behind the scenes control going on. So yeah, there's a lot to uncover there. I'm not sure that all of that is part of the Grow Everything podcast mission, but it could be interesting to have someone come on and talk about functional music for creativity and work.
Yeah, but also biology. That's what I'm really interested in.
And biology. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, actually, there is a company that we know of that is here in New York City that uses sound waves to separate different cell types. I think they're doing it for cell therapy purposes to separate cells that would be used in cell therapy. I thought it could be an interesting application for clean meat. I'll have to look into that and maybe we can link them to the show notes as well.
Nice. Awesome. That's cool. And so what else has been going on, Karl?
So I had one huge topic, but I wanted to keep it brief. A lot of the conversation in the media has been around the impact of the tariffs. The tariffs are affecting all sorts of products. People are predicting empty shelves sometime this summer. And biotech has been not yet impacted. And there has been a lot of talk around drug shortages because many of these drugs that are used on an everyday basis are produced in China or elsewhere. And people see that as a national security risk. Whether the tariffs are going to mean that the production of these drugs will start to happen in the United States has yet to be seen. But there is a counter narrative saying that the tariffs are actually going to be good and are going to spur innovation in the United States. Whether that happens quickly is another story. But Maya Benami of Lek Partners posted a link on LinkedIn to a low-cost, do-it-yourself bioreactor system that was developed for educational and research purposes. And this bioreactor can be built for less than 400 euros, so around $450 or so. And a standard bioreactor costs between $10,000 and $40,000 for a small one that does 2 to 10 liters. I thought this was super interesting because at the same time, I was digging into this community on Reddit called Space Buckets, where people are taking 2 5-gallon paint buckets, putting lights inside them and using them as grow chambers to grow all sorts of things, but mostly to grow weed. And so I had posted on LinkedIn to Maya, if the weed growers can be this creative and find interesting uses of existing technologies, I think people in the biotech community, including the biopunks, should be able to do interesting things with bioreactors or growth chambers that will make biotech much more accessible and allow people to grow everything. What do you think?
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. First, let's do it. Let's grow something. Second of all, my friend Ed was telling me about micro growers of cannabis. They have their own, I don't even call it a garden, or they just have a small room in their place. They have a storefront, and then there are dispensaries that are legal dispensaries or ones that are soon to be legal. They have stuff that they get from others. So they're distributing other products from growers around the United States, depending on the rules. We'll get Seth back on to talk about that. But they are also growing their own product. And they have probably, I don't know, let's say like 12 plants in a corner of a smaller room, and then they can grow it and then process it or cut off a piece and sell it. But there's micro brewers, so that's pretty popular in a lot of the Brooklyns of cities. There's a lot of that happening. But then there are micro growers as well. But then I'm thinking micro biomanufacturers. And what could we make, Karl? I mean, the DIY is what, 2 to 10 liters? How big are the bioreactors?
Oh, no, these bioreactors are small. They're probably a liter. They look very lab focused. You would see something like this probably at like a Gen Space. Someone would put this together.
Yeah.
It is legal, just FYI, it is legal to grow your own plants, your own cannabis plants in New York State. That was contested as legalization was happening. And the big concern was that people would start these grows in New York City apartments and destroy the floors. And so far, that has not happened. The community really fought to make sure that anybody could grow their own medicine if they wanted to. So this doesn't surprise me that there are micro growers. And if you go into Reddit or you look up space buckets, you'll see how ingenious these things are, because you can buy LEDs. We have plant LEDs in our house. We're not growing cannabis, by the way, but we use them in the winter because we're on a bottom floor. We don't get a lot of sunlight. And I think the LEDs that we bought were very inexpensive. I think if it cost $30. And it was very popular. I did all the research, and it does help the plants a lot. So containing your cannabis to a small space, whether in a tent or in a 5-gallon paint bucket, is very possible. People are ingenious, and what are we going to grow?
Yeah, that's hyper localization. So you were talking earlier about localizing production within the United States, but hey, why not within your closet? I mean, that would be great. There's a lot of high value, low volume products that we could think of making that for 1 liter of bioreactor capacity.
Yeah.
So cool. That's awesome. Well, this is what we're doing. We're thinking about what we could make. We'll put that on our bucket list, no pun intended, in terms of getting that bioreactor built.
All right. So why don't we let ourselves take over and recap Synbiobeta 2024, and then stay tuned for our 2025 recap in a couple of weeks.
Awesome. Hey, Karl, how's it going?
Erum, what a crazy time we live in, right?
Oh my God, I'm exhausted from last week's Synbiobeta 2024. How are you feeling?
It definitely took a couple of days to recover. I came home earlier than you did. I know you stayed an extra day. You stayed Friday. I left Friday morning. But here we are. It's Tuesday morning. I feel like I'm still in recovery because of the amount of information that we consumed, flying cross country. And there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I was surprised and humbled by the amount of people that we've met that recognize us, that recognize us by our voice, which was a little bit weird since we have a podcast. A lot of listeners that came up to you or I said that they appreciated the podcast. So I'm going to give a shout out to a couple of people that came up to me or talked to me about it. So Beaky of Rice University, who's doing incredible work on bioelectricity. He was telling me about his research, and I was just floored. This guy's a genius. There's also Matt DeLeo of ELO, and he's working on molecular farming and future food. And I just met him in the lunch line. He was like, "Oh, Yuri Rum from the Grow Everything podcast." And I'm like,
so
that
funny.
is right. I was like, "You are right. Would you like me to sign an autograph?" And he was like, "No, no, he didn't do that." And our favorites, Daniel Dominguez Gomez and Ricardo Chavez, they are incredible. They're doing great work in Latin America, really bringing about a community of doers, thinkers, having them think about how to leverage synthetic biology. So it was great to have lunch with them and catch up with them. What about you? Who did you get to meet?
I mean, there was a bunch of people. And so if I was rude to anybody just because I was like rushing from one place to another, I apologize. But in particular, it was good to meet Charlie Vavrick, Minerva Castellanos, who is also from Mexico and works for Teselagen, who's been on this podcast. It's great to see her. Pratik BioWag, who we've known for a while, was really great to see. Also, Amy Vashi was someone who came up to us and took a really good picture. All the fans, we really appreciate it. Again, I'll apologize if I was rude to anybody just because I was going quickly from one place to another. I have a bunch of people that I took their name tags, and I'm going to follow up with them on LinkedIn or via email, and I'm looking forward to engaging with them. But it was really nice to meet a bunch of the fans. What did you think about the sessions? We kind of like divided and conquered us at Messaging Lab. There was 3 of us there, and we each went in our own direction and then would trade notes at the end of the day. But there was a bunch of things that we did see together. One of the things that was pretty unavoidable because there was so much of it going on was AI times biotech. What was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that it was center stage because there's a lot going on. First of all, we had our friend of the pod, Brooklyn Biotech Mafia, who organized the AI and biotech track and conversations. And that was Shelby of Compound VC. She also co-hosted the podcast with me when you were away. I loved it. I mean, one of the talks that really got to me and I really appreciated was a talk by Patrick Su of the ARC Institute. And he quoted the Nobel laureate Francis Arnold. And the quote that he pulled was, "Today, we can, for all practical purposes, read, write, and edit any sequence of DNA, but we cannot compose it." Which, when I read that, I was like floored. When it comes to technology and leveraging computation in biology, obviously there's the ones and zeros and the computation side and the genetic code ATGC. And we're just like really thinking very, 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 very narrowly. And we're like, okay, we figured this out. But what's the song? What are we really making here? What can we do? We're talking about healthcare. We're talking about new materials, new products. What is that going to look like as we start gaining more ability to write DNA? I thought that was amazing. And he did a great job of breaking down how they're generating whole genome sequences. And I just felt like the work that they're doing at the ARC Institute is making it more accessible to also biologists that might not have the in-depth biocomputational training that they need if they want to do whole genome sequencing. So I thought that session was very good. What about you? What stood out to you in the AI biotech track?
I was floored by that ARC Institute presentation as well. Frances Arnold had been at Synbiobeta 2 years in a row. She was there last year, and I think she was there the year before. And her expertise is directed evolution, I believe. So having him quote her, I thought made a lot of sense. What really stood out to me in terms of that particular session was this idea of a lot of the tools that we have for doing biology and biotechnology that aren't the computational tool, the wet lab tools, come from studying microbes, which is something that our friends at Cultivarium are doing. The guy from ARC Institute made it sound like they would be able to do a lot of that stuff computationally. And we did see that also with our friends from Biomatter talking about de novo protein synthesis. So people creating proteins that are developed for a specific purpose, as opposed to looking for examples in nature, which is really the way that people were designing enzymes before. So I thought that was incredible. I think on that AI bio thing, a couple episodes ago, Elliot Hirschberg, who was at the conference and we had conversations with him, had said that AI will be the language of biology, given how complex biology is, meaning that we've got trillions of cells and each cell has trillions of operations going on simultaneously. And so you need something as powerful as artificial intelligence to be able to study that, because it's just too complicated for the human mind to fathom.
Yeah.
So I thought that all those AI talks were fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what goes forward with AI and biotech.
Another great talk that happened on the AI biotech track was with Alex Reeves of Evolutionary Scale. And I caught up towards the end of that talk, but he shared a slide where it was talking about AlphaFold's protein structure database of having 200 million structures in 2022 and compared it to ESM, which is another protein folding database that had 600 million protein structures. And this talk happened the day after AlphaFold 3.0 dropped. And AlphaFold 3.0 is not only predicting protein structure, but the interactions that these proteins have with different biomolecules. So that's the next level. We're leveling up here. Now we're able to see more of that composition that we were wondering about. If you can write DNA, how do you compose it? Well, now AlphaFold 3 can give us some hints towards that. And I think that's a great thing. It's going to be interesting to see what it predicts or what's there, but it's a lot of information. And the other side of this would be, okay, AI, artificial intelligence, where it's going to be predicting, guessing based on the data that we're providing it or just the information it has. But we still don't know a lot about natural intelligence, right? Like how and why are things evolving? I mean, I know, of course, it's a response to the environment, but there's just so much going on in nature, we just don't know. And one of the more profound thoughts behind natural intelligence, what's going on behind biology, I heard recently came from Neri Oxman. And she was talking about the natural Internet of biology. And she was saying it so poetically and in her own way. She's like very philosophical. But what is driving natural intelligence? And of all of the different trillions of microbes that are out there, what can we learn from what's out there versus what our computers are, simulating? So if they had the AI and biotech track versus a natural intelligence track of whoever's studying this, I think that would be a great collaboration or contrast to see what similarities and differences there are.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm fascinated by it. The other thing that related to all this AI talk was the Shuri announcement of basically a novel business model that gives companies access to, I think right now it's 30 million proteins that have been characterized that they potentially could have access to. But the idea is to have access to 250 million proteins in this library that you could apply to either as ingredients or, I don't know, medicines, enzymes, whatever you were going to use those to. For me, what was fascinating about that was less the scale than the idea of this new business model that was emerging. That was announced right before the conference. So we have to see how that's going to play out, but I'm going to be paying attention to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So beyond the AI biotech, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm sure there'll be little snippets that reveal themselves to us as we talk about it on this podcast moving forward. But my track that I love and always participate in at Synbiobeta, which is actually this is my second time going, so not always, but yes, that is true, is the space and biomanufacturing track. Which, oh my gosh, they definitely leveled up. They had some familiar faces and new ones. I just find it incredible that they're making more advances. I'm excited about it. Kind of the bitter part of me is like, oh, we should have been doing this since the 60s. Why has it been taking so long? It's been almost 60 years.
I knew that was going to be a big track, and it was for us because, I mean, the moment we walked into the first evening networking event, there was astronaut Kate Rubins, who we've met and we've invited on the pod. There was Chris Mason, who's a Cornell Weill professor who's written a book called The Next 500 Years and has been very involved in NASA and space-related efforts. So it was really great to see them, and it was really great to see some of the other people that are working in space. Elizabeth Reynolds, who's been on this podcast. It was the first session on the main stage the morning that the conference kicked off. And my biggest takeaway from that was there's a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs. There's opportunities for miniaturization, making things more rugged, automating things, and anything that has to do with biology and space is going to be a huge opportunity.
What do you mean by rugged?
You have to make things that are going to withstand the challenges of space. Okay. Space is a harsh environment, not just for humans. The other thing, too, is that Kate Rubins mentioned that space is a model for aging. Astronauts experience a lot of physiological changes. Their vision changes, they have arterial stiffening, their immune system changes. And so given that we're going to see more people go into space, anything we learn about them being in space is going to be useful for the longevity space here on Earth.
Yeah, that's a big one. One of the side sessions on the space track was about medicines and plants in space and what kind of work they're doing there and how can you grow things in space, of course. There's not just the plants, but also medicine. So right now, what they do is they bring almost like a large booklet of pharmaceutical drugs that they need, but have a half-life. They change their efficacy when they're in space over time. So after a certain time, they're not useful anymore. So how do you get drugs in space, right? So what kind of plants do you need to grow? And plants, of course, you're starting to create a whole ecosystem up there. They can emit oxygen, take CO2 out of the air, of course, provide food. That's a very necessary thing if we're talking about long space missions, whether it's going to the moon or to Mars, of course. That's the Mars shot. I was going to say moon shot, but the Mars shot of going there. And so that was a big conversation with several people in space. It's so interesting to me to see all of these efforts that are happening in parallel, but they're very collaborative. So there was BioAstra, the Francis Crick Institute's doing work there, Interstellar Labs, of course, our friend Elizabeth Reynolds of Starburst Aerospace. I was so happy to see her. It was great to chat with her after we interviewed her on the pod. So that was a few episodes ago. And they're all collaborating, and it's been great to see how they're thinking. They're also thinking about how do embryonic cells behave in low Earth orbit? Because going to Mars, they say it's a one-way trip. So yes, you can send things in advance and have things growing there, have some infrastructure there, using robotics and rovers and other types of non-human efforts. And then when humans land there, there's at least some type of infrastructure there that they can go into. But I always think we're sending these like metal sterile objects up there, which now they're realizing, okay, we need microbes. We need to have this symbiotic relationship, not just humans in a sterile vat. But why not create like a microplanet, which would be like a spaceship? And I'm saying this, and it reminds me a little bit of Evan Bayer, who was also there, by the way. But like the spaceship Earth, but really literally making a spaceship with as much Earth material as possible and just float it up rather than like using explosions to get it out. Just let it just float along. But that's just my imagination. That's what I was thinking.
It would take a really long time to get there if it's just floating along.
Floating along. Well, well, when you're in zero gravity and you can have some solar
just give
sails.
It a push, exactly. Yeah,
you can definitely move it along, and it doesn't be explosions. It could be something mechanical, like a bicycle. Just a bike. All right. I just had a little coffee. I'm not on drugs, but I did think about this after I went to some of the psychedelic talks, which we can talk about later. But I just felt like the space was very inspirational, I would say, very aspirational. And we're definitely going to have Chris Mason on the pod, hopefully soon. And some of these other people that we've met that are doing very specific things.
There's a lot there. I'm excited about it. As Messaging Lab, we divided and conquered at the conference. I'll have you talk about psychedelics. I spent time going to almost all the DNA synthesis talks because that's been an area we've done a fair amount of work in. And it seemed like there's lots of news and developments in the space. But really the two big things I took away were, one is there's increasing demand, and scientists increasingly want custom sequences, which is hard. It's a very challenging thing to do. But DNA synthesis underpins the bioeconomy. So there's a lot of need for being able to produce DNA inexpensively and securely. That was a whole other track, the biosecurity track. There's two companies. One we work with, Aclid Bio, that provides a screening solution for DNA synthesis providers. But the other big thing that came out of the DNA synthesis tracks was there's been a lot of interest in DNA medicines and a lot of medicines that would be based on DNA that maybe would activate upon certain physiological changes happening in your body. And I don't remember who it was, predicted we're probably going to see these DNA medicines start to appear on the market in less than 5 years. So that's very exciting. I know there's a lot of movement in that space, and we continue to see it on the DNA synthesis side. A lot of talk about DNA printing, enzymatic synthesis, and it's a space that we, like I said, we do pay a lot of attention to.
So how are DNA medicines different than living medicines?
So I think DNA medicines can be living medicines. There's gene and cell therapy. And when I think of cell therapy, you're treating specific cells in the body, but it doesn't mean that cell therapy couldn't be living cells that have been manipulated outside of you and then reinserted. One of the rate limiting steps to a lot of these things is the manufacturing of them, because these medicines are typically customized to the patient. They're not something that, it's not like aspirin, you just give it to everybody. But I think there's a lot to unpack in that space, and we should have someone come on to talk about the difference between DNA medicines, gene therapy, cell therapy, and mRNA therapy, because those are all very specific. But at their core, they all have nucleic acid, either DNA or RNA as their basis.
Yeah, I mean, we do have our episode with Murali Muthuswamy, who talks about living medicines and his company, eLife Therapeutics. And that was released a few episodes ago. And for that episode is when we had Shelby do the co-hosting. So that's a little primer for anybody that wants to dig into that.
Right. Okay. So we divided and conquered. Mm-hmm. You and Jordan took notes on the psychedelics track.
Psychedelics is more Jordan's jam. She actually also wrote a great article that we have on our website about psychedelics today, the challenges of commercialization and the different types that are either coming on the market and how they work. But I got a chance to go to a couple of them because I'm a big fan of Paul Stamets. I saw him on the main stage and went to his side events. On the main stage, he actually did not talk about psilocybin as much. He actually talked about agricon, a mushroom that he's been studying for quite some time. Paul Stamets is a self-taught mycologist. He learned by observation and foraging and going into the forest and listening, and then also taking a little bit of psilocybin and listening under that state. And he studied agricon and found all these different strains. And then he found a super strain that has multiple healing properties. And he talked about that on stage because he wanted to make a point about how we are going to have another pandemic in the near future, and we need to prepare. He was specifically talking about the H5N1 bird flu that's happening now. And he said you can prevent like 99.9%. There's a chance that a super strain can jump to a cow. And even if that's mostly protected, there's still one strain that can then jump to a pig and then jump to a human. He made a good point. You can't argue with his logic. He was making an argument, a call to action for Synbiobeta, for the community to start thinking about collaboration, because if the strain goes into humans, we need to fight it fast and quickly to find that patient zero and act as fast as possible, and to consider mushrooms. We were talking about DNA synthesis earlier and mRNA, which mRNA did a great job of helping us with the COVID vaccine. But there are a lot of solutions that exist in mushrooms and just in the living world that we can search for and at least start having a database of those things. So I thought that was great. That wasn't really about the psychedelics. That conversation happened in a side event. And that side event was amazing. I think everyone that listens to this pod knows that psilocybin is a treatment for various mental disorders, so PTSD, trauma, and depression. But Paul Stamets also took it to the next level, saying, look, depression of the mind is also depression, a physical depression. It causes depression of the immune system, which no one can argue with that either. If you are stressed out, your stress actually has a physical effect on your body. That is truth. So he was saying that psilocybin can also be preventative as a treatment, and even in small doses or larger doses, even depending on what kind of experience you want to have. And I thought that was very interesting because this is a molecule that's being used recreationally, and now it's being looked at in a clinical setting. And It's becoming more commonplace as a treatment. However, now, as regulation comes, of course, with people that don't know a lot, that fear something, I don't know what they're fearing, they have only allowed synthetic psilocybin to be used in treatments. So that is really just focusing on that one molecule.
Right.
But wild psilocybin has multiple molecules working in concert with each other. And this is considered an entourage effect. So there is a difference. And they have looked at patients and other people that have used synthetic versus wild psilocybin. And it's a different effect where the wild, there's more of a kind of a crescendo to an experience and a nice drop off. And they felt more in tune with nature. They felt at one. With the synthetic experience, the synthetic psilocybin, it felt like it was more of a very rushed experience where it went from 0 to 60. They had an experience and then it was just gone. It just felt like that synthetic molecule just took control of the person. Like they didn't have control over the experience. And I thought that was like, wow, we don't know. And then it's got me thinking about just pharmaceuticals in general, where it is just one molecule. What kind of entourage effects do we need to have proper treatment of whatever's going on, whatever's ailing us? That was very profound. He was on the stage with another doctor who also had some great insights. But of course, Paul, every time he talks about science and nature, he really brings a societal aspect to it, and he speaks to the people. So I just love talking to him, and I had a chance to speak to him one-on-one a few times, and just love the guy.
Yeah, I mean, this whole entourage effect is something that gets talked a lot about in the cannabis space as well, because it's the same thing. If you take the medical marijuana and recreational marijuana are increasingly becoming legal across the United States. So you have edibles available, and many of the gummies just use pure THC, which again gives you this very blunted effect because you're just taking this one isolated molecule versus the gummies that use the whole plant extract. So they're also having more of that entourage effect that you're talking about. It's the same thing in terms of the difference between taking one of the ingredients of cannabis, whether that's THC or CBD, or consuming whole plant where you've got hundreds of other compounds that are working together. And so I think that there's a lot to be explored when it comes to natural medicines. I remember a few years ago at Synbiobeta, someone said that we would see a renaissance in Chinese traditional medicine because synthetic biology would make it possible to isolate the actives of the various herbs and fungi that go into treating people with TCM. But what that misses is all of the other compounds that are associated with those plants that together cause that health creating, health maintaining, health returning effects. So I think we have a huge amount to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Learning from tradition and not writing it off. I just felt a lot of people in the science community, especially in the drug development world, just have written off anything that's traditional, that people in ancient times have spent thousands and thousands of years honing in on. And all of a sudden, it's just like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Now we have all this technology to do what? They've done their own studies, sure, when they provided some types of herbs or fungi to people and they saw a health benefit. And they kept it on their docket saying, yes, these things work. I'm almost done reading Braiding Sweetgrass. I bring it up a lot. It's just been transforming the way that I think about wild type plants and animals and how there's been loss of tradition, especially when it comes to Native American culture, that they've honed in on so many different plants and knowledge about the natural world that was part of their language that just has been eradicated. And again, at the top of this episode, I was talking about what is this natural intelligence? We need to get back to that. And how do we preserve it? How do we make sure it's not lost? Or if it's lost, how do we find it again? I think that when it comes to taking different plants, there's a power in taking multiple compounds that play off each other. That's why we need probiotics. We have a crazy microbiome in our guts and our eyes and our mouth. Like, they're all different. They have different needs. So what are we providing them? We can't just give them one molecule. We have to give them a bunch of different molecules. So yeah, I think that's definitely a different pod as well.
It's interesting that you mentioned microbiome. I don't feel like microbiome was that represented this year at Synbiobeta. Did I miss it?
Yeah, there was some talks about it. There were a few. One was interesting, was the new oral microbiome company.
Oh, yeah. You did mention this.
Yeah. That's what John dreamed up last year when we interviewed him, because I asked him, if you can start a company, what company would you start? He was like, an oral microbiome company, so I don't have to brush my teeth. The microbes can just do all the cleaning. And I was like, oh, that's funny. And then when we interviewed him again earlier this year, he's like, well, there is a company and they're going to be at Synbiobeta. So they were there, and our friend Ginger got to meet with them, and she was telling me that they formulated what they call living probiotic, but it's in powder form. And like the directions are, first you brush your teeth with a non-fluoride based toothpaste, right, and then you apply this powder on your teeth, and then you eat some type of candy or some type of pill or something to activate it. And I think you just do it monthly or something just to keep that microbiome alive or inoculate it amongst your oral microbiome. I don't know if it works or not.
So another thing, every year Synbiobeta evolves. There's always some really big companies there. Boston Consulting Group was there. They held a side event with our friends at Synonym. P&G had a big presence there. Estee Lauder was there. L'Oreal, Unilever, and then the big food companies, Cargill, ADM. And a big part of that is they're scouting technologies. They're trying to develop relationships with startups. And that's, I think, always an interesting topic. We know what that's like because we've lived it. We've advised big companies. We have advised startups on how to develop those relationships with the big companies. L'Oreal in particular, they were on stage. You had written down about their investment with Debut.
Yeah, so I attended a session where it was L'Oreal, Debut, and Ebolus Biotech. So Ebolus is I wouldn't say a startup, but they are a contract research organization that focuses on biotech. And Debut, as you know, is a startup in the biotech beauty space. So they make different types of products on the skincare side. So it was a great conversation because L'Oreal was there, and then they were able to talk about how they work with Debut, who they've invested in, and Ebolus, who is their research partner. This representative of L'Oreal, I believe his name's Adam, he was saying, look, we have a certain methodology when we work with startups. We don't look at them as a vendor. So that's something separate because they have their own supply chains to make their products. So that's a different relationship. With the startup, they understand that they have to work more hand in hand with those companies. And it's either co-developing products. So that is what they're doing with Abolus. Abolus is doing certain projects with them. I'm not exactly sure which projects in particular, but the representative from Abolus was talking about how they have this great symbiotic relationship with L'Oreal. And then with Debut, it's an investment. So it's a different type of relationship because, of course, they want Debut to win, right? It's not an exclusive where they're saying, okay, you're only working with L'Oreal. No, they know that Debut would have to work with multiple companies in order to be successful so that L'Oreal can reap the rewards of the profits that Debut stands to make. So I think it's really interesting that they were able to share their perspectives and how they align and work together to make bio-better products, a word that someone from L'Oreal was saying, the bio-better products, which I like that terminology. And it was a great conversation. I thought what was really interesting, though, is this panel was facilitated by someone from BCG. Someone asked a question about product versus platform, a question that stands the test of time in the startup world. And I thought it was very interesting because the representative from BCG was like, oh, yeah, definitely platform because investors like to see a bigger market. I thought that was a bit jarring when he answered that way because it really depends on what your company is doing rather than having a bold statement because this person does work at this big management consulting firm. So people listen. And I was just kind of shocked that he made that very bold statement versus having a more nuanced answer because it depends. Our friends at K18, they didn't create a platform, they created a product and they've been so successful and got acquired by Unilever. They are a great poster child of product-led companies. So that's my little critique of this particular session.
Yeah, I mean, all he had to do was look at the current news. So Ginkgo Bioworks, we're huge fans of Ginkgo. Ginkgo's a platform company. People have been predicting that Ginkgo was going to have a hard time because the history of synthetic biology is littered with platform company failures. Most notably, a couple of years ago, Zymergen went under, another platform company that never really had a product that made it to market. Amyris, which had a lot of products, but really served as a platform company that suddenly pivoted to creating brands, but instead of really focusing on one brand, went into like 10 or 18 brands. It was like a huge number. So platforms are very challenging. Tom Baruch, who we've worked with, early synthetic biology investor, veteran Silicon Valley investor, has written about this extensively on his Medium column. And I know we can point to platform company successes, but it is very challenging. It is very challenging in synthetic biology. It is very challenging as a science business when you're trying to develop a science at the same time as you're trying to create a brand, at the same time that you're trying to create revenue. But pure platform play is very challenging.
Well said.
One of the other things that we see a lot of at Synbiobeta is investors. And investors are there at every session. Like the big companies, they're there scouting new technology. You mentioned Shelby at the beginning, running the AI track. So the investors are there. They're a little bit tighter with their pocketbooks right now. There was a lot of talk about how the funding environment is very challenging for SynBio right now. But who else did we run into, Erum, from our investor friends?
We spotted the sometimes elusive, but very, very heartwarming, friendly face of Kristen Ellis of Lower Carbon. It was such a joy to see her. She's one of our OG Brooklyn Biotech Mafia peeps, was at early Opentrons and found herself now in the VC world, which, Low Carbon's super lucky to have her. She's just so smart and personable. I just loved seeing her. And it was great to see her on stage with some other investors. Not Boring was on stage, Packy from Not Boring. Although we had Elliot Hirschberg on our pod, he was there as well, which I didn't get to say hi to him, but that's the nature of these huge conferences. Genoa Ventures, Coastal Ventures, there was a lot. But I would say the big takeaway that I got from the panel that Kristen led, and she summarized the whole panel beautifully because she is a master speaker and synthesizer of information. She was saying, look, we're not investing in biotech. We're investing in solutions to big problems. And if they happen to be biotech, that's great. And I think that's a good thing for a lot of founders to think about. I mean, of course, we believe that biotech is a great solution for some problems, but not all problems. The whole concept of over-engineering a solution, I think that's something that I've been feeling too with a lot of the AI and biotech and getting into the weeds when we're talking about DNA synthesis. It's like, okay, do we need to go that far for some of these problems? Maybe not. Maybe we can just look to nature. Again, a theme that I keep reiterating in this pod. But I thought that was a great takeaway from the investor panel for other founders to hear, is that they're investing in solutions. So you don't have to go hard on the biotech in first meetings or any tech. I still talk to lots of founders and listen to their pitches. And it's just 10 slides of tech and a fraction of a slide about the go-to-market strategy. And it's like, come on, let's go. We need to talk about the business. If you're looking for venture capital,
what's the problem? Yeah.
What's the problem? How are you going to make a 10x return? What have you thought through? I want to see the way you think about business. Because if you're not thinking about business, you're going to have a hard time raising money. But if you think about the science, maybe you should just get grant funding and figure the business out later. There's other ways of getting money. So anyway, great investor panel.
It goes back to what we were saying earlier about platform versus product. And this stuff has been dissected by Gary Pisano of Harvard Business School in a book called Science Business, which is written in the 2000s. So the problem has been dissected many years ago, and people should know their history. And building a business around a science that is unproven is very challenging. It's not that it can't be done, it can, but it's going to be a lot harder than trying to just build a product business and getting a product on the market. There are a lot of business models. I highlighted the fact that I was excited about the Shuri business model, this marketplace for proteins, and I am fascinated by new business models. I started off in synthetic biology by writing about business models, and I got to know some of the early pioneers in this space because I think business model innovation is as important as the science. But when you're trying to innovate a business model while you're also trying to innovate the science, while you're trying to build a company, that's too many things at once. Mm-hmm. It's better to be hyper-focused on solving a problem. I will just add one thing to my rant. I did run a panel about scaling biotech products, and it was really about different companies and how they're addressing the market. We talked a little bit about K18, but Charles Dimmler was on that panel. And when we were talking about your audience and consumers, Charlie interrupted me and said, "Karl, what's the number one rule of storytelling?" And I was like, "Well, you got to have a good story." And Charlie's like, "No, what's the step before that?" And he said, "It's know your audience." And Christina Agapakis, who was also on it, was like, "Yeah, know your audience." So I felt humbled and happy that they corrected me with something that we say all the time. You got to know your audience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Oh my God, I love it. I love it. Yeah, that was a cool session. I mean, of course, I wanted to go to that, but there was like 15 sessions happening at the same time. And I'm lucky that I get to talk to you, not only on this pod, but from the day-to-day. And you always going to get the download. And it conflicted with Paul Stamets, so you had no chance.
Yeah. And if you weren't there, just so you know, there's multiple sessions happening simultaneously, as well as sessions that are happening in the grand ballroom. So logistically, it can be very challenging. We decided that we would divide and conquer. We made a spreadsheet of all the sessions. We looked at the things that were of interest to us and of interest to our clients, the people that we knew, the people that we wanted to get to know. And that's how we really decided how we would spend our time at Synbiobeta. And it's something actually that we've done for our clients, and we help our clients figure this out. So just a plug for Messaging Lab and a big part of what we do. And we have found is very successful. And if you're interested in learning more about how to effectively go to a conference, call us. You can hire us to help you do this. And our clients end up having mad success when they go to conferences based on the things that we teach them.
Exactly. Yeah, we do a whole analysis of who's attending. Oftentimes we know those people. So even at Synbiobeta, we were introducing investors to some of our earlier stage clients. We were introducing some potential partners and collaborators, or just interesting people, and being able to really get into the industry, because business is a relationship exercise. Businesses are run by people, so it is a social exercise. It's been a lot of fun. So we have noticed, like Karl mentioned, success. What is the ROI of attending conferences? Because it costs a lot of money, especially if it's a conference that's not in your hometown. So you have to travel, accommodations for multiple people, because the more people you can go, the better it is, because then you can divide and conquer, as Karl said. And our clients have closed sales because we made those introductions, or we've done this extensive research and background work on the conference and who's attending, and doing the homework, doing the prep work, doing the early outreach, and then the follow-up. There is a method to the madness, and we were happy to report that our frameworks, our playbooks work. So definitely hit us up if that's something that you're interested in.
So the one thing I would add that is, I guess, adjacent to or part of this conversation is the fact that when we're on our way to these side sessions, everybody's on their way to these side sessions, or if they're not going to a session, they'll be going into the expo hall, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But a lot of times what happens is, it would happen to me, I'm sure it happened to you too, Erum, I would get pulled into conversations, and the conversation would be so interesting that I would miss an entire session. I've had people say to me in the past, the reason that they're like, I love running into you, Karl, at Synbiobeta. The only problem is that you introduced me to someone, that conversation is so great, and then you've disappeared and I haven't had a chance to catch up with you. So I see that as being a good thing, because I think part of my job at Synbiobeta is to just connect people. And it's a great opportunity for us to connect with people and for us to connect people with each other.
And we have a rule where we don't talk to each other. I mean, it's not a rule, but because we talk to each other so much, we're like, if you're friends or people that you can talk to outside of this conference, obviously be friendly. But the goal is to meet new people. So you and I don't really see each other much at these conferences because we're always just talking to other people. We have our own little missions that we're trying to accomplish. But now we're here and we get to dish a little bit now.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do some quick hits of interesting tidbits, interesting things that we saw. The one that I noted was I went to the CEO lunch, and it was interesting because I sat next to the CEO of a company called Cura, which is another protein design company that is about 1,000 kilometers south of Santiago, Chile. I need to look at a map to see if that is further south than any of the Australian companies. Australia had a very big presence there. So shout out to Phil Morrill of Main Sequence Ventures and all the people from Main Sequence that were there, the people from Cauldron that were there to represent biomanufacturing. But the fact that this company Cura is so far south was fascinating to me. We were there with our friends from Biomatter, which is a protein design company. They're from Lithuania. I think Helsinki is north of them, but I just wonder what biotech companies are further north than Helsinki or further south than where Cura is. But the other big takeaway from the CEO lunch was Professor Drew Endy of Stanford, one of the fathers of synthetic biology, said that they had given away 250 light bio plants. So these are plants that glow in the dark to the freshman bioengineering class at Stanford. So all these kids all of a sudden have this plant that glows, showing how this kind of science that we talk about here at Grow Everything is real and very tangible. These light bio plants are available. You can go online and order them. I think you probably have to wait, but I think there's nothing like seeing what we talk about on this podcast in real life.
Yeah. I have some tea about light bio.
Okay.
I think it's great. I heard the grapevine. So you can order the light bio plant. And so you can just go on the website and order it. Some people that were at the conference were mentioning that they had ordered it. Some haven't received theirs yet. And others haven't received notifications, but they were told that it was delivered when they were away. So they came back from their travels. The plants were dead. I also heard that the unboxing was a bit challenging. It's not Light Bio's fault. I mean, I think it's a lesson in how to package plants for a shipping experience because there's dirt everywhere or crushed. So I'm not sure how the bioengineering students received those plants, if Drew Endy just bought a bunch and then fixed them up and then shared them in the class, or did they send them directly to the students' dorms or wherever they're staying and had that experience. But first of all, everyone was so excited to buy a bioluminescent plant. This was the product to get earlier this year.
Yeah, last quarter. We had a bunch of people reaching out to us saying, hey, Are you going to order the plant? Can we order it together? Apparently shipping was very expensive.
So there we go. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So let's just go through that whole last mile experience really quick, because this was, I think, a good lesson. So the hype was awesome. Everyone was super excited about it. Everyone went to the website. It was like $29 for the plant.
Reasonable.
Very reasonable for a bioluminescent plant. So you click on purchase and then you put your address in. Shipping was double or triple for people. That causes hesitation in pressing purchase. Then you were saying that a lot of people in Brooklyn were like, all right, why don't we just get together and make one shipment so we don't have to pay this massive shipping fee? And then the whole, when are you going to get notified that it's going to arrive? Because that's what consumers come to experience in this Amazon world that we live in, where we just know minute to minute of when our deliveries are going to arrive. So that was missing in this Light Bio experience. So like, when are they going to arrive? How are they going to arrive is a big thing too, is the whole unboxing experience, right? We just get something in the mail. It's like a little present. What does that look like? And it was like, oh, that last mile, they just need to tweak that, but I'm sure they will. This is a lesson for them, but I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so I'm going to add one piece of commentary to it. If you've ever purchased an Apple product, you know that the unboxing experience is unparalleled. The box opens, and I think all Apple products open approximately the same. Apple has entire design teams that are specialized in packaging. Cosmetics companies spend as much on the packaging as they do the product. And I think synthetic biology companies need to understand, like you said, Erum, consumers have a certain expectation. They want to be able to track their package, and something as special as a glowing plant deserves a package that elevates the experience.
Yeah, and there's also some competitors coming on the scene. There's a company called Ghostfire that's also making a bioluminescent plant, but there are other bioluminescent experiences going on, and we had a wonderful experience at Synbiobeta. Actually, it was a side event. So it wasn't technically Synbiobeta. It was a side event that happened at the Tech Museum, which is organized by Dan Grushkin. But our friend Andy Bass had this whole bioluminescent experience. He's starting a venture where he's revolutionizing ocean entertainment using bioluminescent algae. In particular, he has been cultivating and nurturing a dinoflagellate community for years. And he had crafted this whole experience where we were able to interact with this algae, whether we were splashing around, either walking on these mats that were filled with water and the algae. So every time you took a step, it would glow, because they only glow to respond to some type of movement. And oh my gosh, what a magical experience. What did you think? What did you take away from that?
So there's a tech museum not far from the convention center. The lucky thing about San Jose is everything's right nearby. And probably like a 5-minute walk from the convention center was this event that Dan Grushkin of the Biodesign Challenge and one of the co-founders of GenSpace set up. Part of it was what you're talking about, this luminescent experience where you would walk into this dark room, your eyes have to adjust. And Andy had put together this pool. And like you said, you could either step across it if you took your shoes off, or you could splash the water. And when you would splash, you would see this glowing. And I think that you can see that in different places in nature. I know that we went to Mexico a couple of years ago. We did not do the night boat trip that allows you to see it, but it is something that happens in nature. So I'm very excited for what Andy's going to do with that. But then you went into an IMAX theater, and Dan had organized, I think, 9 mini events or mini plays or videos that were all related to things in the biotech age. I think the one that I enjoyed the most was from Japanese pop music video called The Red Silk of Fate. And the Japanese artist is Sputniko, who apparently has done all sorts of different art projects, but it was very topical to what we were there for. The other one that really stood out was animator Drew Barry, who, if you go onto YouTube, you can see his animations of DNA transcription, how DNA transcribes in real time. And he worked with Bjork probably 11 or 12 years ago. And that entire experience he talked about, and they ended up making a drum machine based on DNA synthesis. So that was fascinating. And I think we need to see more of these kind of cultural interpretations of the things that the scientists are doing so that it becomes part of the pop culture and the general narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. Bjork collaboration. I'm a huge fan of Bjork. Bjork also lived in Brooklyn for some time. I don't know if she has a house here, so I don't know if you still have a chance to see her. But Drew Barry was definitely a fangirl before he worked with her, so it definitely sounded like it was
Fanboy.
yeah. Sorry, he was a fanboy of Bjork.
But she was a fangirl of his DNA animation.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I thought that whole experience, which I'm so sad that I didn't know at the time, but now I know. So that drum machine actually lives in the album app that Bjork made. So it has the Drew Barry work. So the DNA drum machine, that's one thing, but it has multiple different types of virtual instruments based on other data. I guess you can say it like that. But I'll find it. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put the Japanese anime in the show notes and some of the other pieces if they're available online. They're so creative. There was one that was a commercial for an external womb, an incubator that would grow the baby from day one before it is birthed, before you open the incubator, which would be the day of birth. But just the thinking behind how it would look, how it would work, what the parents would do during the quote unquote pregnancy in the incubator, that was very creative. They had opera singers, almost like a quartet, yes. They were singing on top of a video about xenotransplantation. So this video was a real video of pigs being raised for the organs to transplant. So they were being bred to have human-like organs. So this is something that is real.
It was just in the news. Yeah.
Just in the news. I believe our friends at United Therapeutics, so Martine works in this space as well. The opera was very enchanting. It was the last one of the evening. So I think a lot of people were feeling a little sleepy. And a lot of people were closing their eyes because there was like an image, there was video footage of a pig going under, and they were like shaving the pig to get it ready to do surgery to remove the organ. I closed my eyes at that point, but the music was just enchanting and I felt so sleepy at that point.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth mentioning, like I said, having more biotech in the popular culture. I think we talk about it on the podcast. John Cumbers did a presentation from one of his new ventures, Biological Enlightenment Studios, which is working on a series of videos for YouTube to help kids really get more familiar with biotech and biology in general. I think it's a very smart take on this, but I know we say it here and I'll say it again, we need more biotech to permeate the mainstream so that people are not afraid of this growing industry. And that is the whole purpose while we do this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited for John Cumbers and his team, Thatcher and the crew. It's the Pixar for biology. I'm excited to see what the storylines are. I was pitching you to them because you have such a creative mind. You've written stories. I mean, we can talk about those stories some other time, but it would fit so well in their concept of bringing these biological stories to younger children or even just families, because Pixar isn't just for kids, it's for families.
Yeah.
And the magic is, or the formula would be not being too explicit in the biology, but just enough that it sparks a curiosity. So on their own, they can explore it. It remains to be seen. The team, John, Thatcher, if you're listening, give us a call. We're happy to talk to you about some of these storylines and how we could be helpful.
Right. So we want to close up. I think it's just worth congratulating our guest, our friend, Saveen Sahib of 18 Hair. He received the Synbiobeta Pioneer Award. He had just been on stage doing a presentation about company acquisitions, how big companies should think about working with small companies, whether small companies should consider acquisition. And then they did the Synbiobeta Awards. A lot of interesting people won these awards, and Saveen was one of them. So shout out to Saveen and congratulations once again. But there was a lot of other people we want to do shout outs. I'll let you do Stardom, Erum, because there's so many of them.
Well, I would just say a lot of our guests on the podcast were there. So that was such a joy to see them because now we have this unique experience together. They're part of a community of podcast guests. So one of my favorites, one of my besties is Ginger Dozier of Biomason. She's working on some incredible things, creating an institute for the biomes, which calls it the Biome Consortia. We'll definitely talk to her more about that. We'll have to bring her back on the pod. Her and I have just been jamming out about different things in biotech. The first person that I saw, or actually the second person, the first people I saw was actually Paul Stamets and Pamela, his partner. And then I saw Megan Palmer, our first guest on the pod. And it was amazing because I saw her and she had just come back from a tour with the Secretary of State. They had gone to Anthea to talk about what they were doing. So Megan Palmer was a part of that delegation to talk to the Secretary of State. So she's making moves, taking names. And my other new bestie who was on the pod was Stephanie Michelson. She also emceed during the conference and did a wonderful job. I met her sister, Nikita, who's working at Wild Earth, a pet food company led by Ryan Bethencourt, who was one of the co-founders of IndieBio. So it was great to see like two sisters that are in this space. They're very friendly and heartwarming and fun. Just so many people. Who did you see that you wanted to give a quick shout out to?
Ali Wing walked up to us. That was really super special. It was great to have Charlie on the panel. Murali, we talked to him a bunch. Mark Cotter, Julie Wolf, who's here in Brooklyn. Evan Baer of Ecovative was there. Both Elliot Roth and Elliot Hirschberg. You mentioned Elizabeth Reynolds. We talked about her. I actually didn't see Albert Annis. I know he was there. Did you see him?
Mm-mm.
Oh, maybe he wasn't. I know I did see Ross from TomTex. Alex Rosé, of course. We kept seeing him over and over again. Natse, Andrew Hessel. You mentioned Kristen Ellis. Who else? Did I miss anybody? If I missed anybody, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, you went down the list. It was great. I mean, this is our community. Of course, we're going to see so many people. This is the big event of the year in the SynBio space. Are there other conferences? I mean, we need to hit them up if there are.
There's Ferment, and then there's other stuff that we go to, but those are the two big ones.
And you saw Elliot Roth?
I did see him for a second.
Okay.
For a second.
Oh.
He sat down in front of me and started having a conversation with someone who I was in conversation with. And I didn't even get a chance to say hello because someone else had pulled me aside. But that's just the way things work. Okay, there was an extensive expo hall. What swag did you walk away with as we close this out?
Oh, the Expo Hall. Yes. What a great way to meet some of the newer companies and some of the bigs. P&G was really representing. They had so much swag, all of their quote unquote natural stuff. It was great. Amy Trejo was there when I went to get some of the swag. So lots of shampoos and conditioners. They had this really cool body wash swatches. So
oh, wow.
They're basically like a square. I don't know if they dissolve or they're just coated with body wash. And you just use that swatch to take a shower and that's it. It's all in like cardboard packaging. And I like that. They also had these pencils that had seeds in them. So after you're done using the pencil, you can plant the pencil and grow a plant.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, they had a bunch of stuff. Our friends at Synbiobeta, they are based in Texas. So we had this Texas barbecue rub that they were handing out, which I tasted last night. It's good. It's good. I actually used them on oyster mushrooms. So I don't know if it was meant to be used for that because it ended up being a little bit more salty and spicy. But I think if you used it for something like heartier meats, it'd be not in your face. Because I felt like, oh, the salt. I'm like, oof, that's a lot going on.
Yeah,
there.
I'm saving it to do like a chicken barbecue.
There you go. Okay,
chicken
great.
As a rub.
Yep. And then I also picked up Chris Mason's book, The Next 500 Years, and he signed it, which was awesome. And he wrote, because he is a Brooklyn friend of ours too. And he said, Deary Rum, Brooklyn will be represented on Mars.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah. And he drew a little picture and he signed it and everything. It's really, really sweet. And there's a lot of people that had written books that were represented. So I think Paul Salmon started a new book called Mycelium Running, but you had to pre-order, and a few other people wrote books.
Jamie Metzel, who's written a lot about synthetic biology, is part of the Atlantic Council, is also a SynBio investor, someone who I've fanboyed for a number of years. He was there. He was one of the first people I met coming in. But actually, besides Chris's book, I think the only swag I picked up was some stickers from the Australians, from the Australian Genome Foundry. They had some cool stickers of platypuses and kangaroos and Australian native animals. And then Cauldron was giving out these kind of groovy magnets to fold up wires. Usually I don't take that much swag. I used to take a lot of it when the boys were little because I would bring back like stress balls or pencils or little journals, but I don't do that very much anymore. So I didn't really bring much with me. But Expo Hall, again, we've said it before. It's like if you've never been to an event and you're uncomfortable, the Expo Hall is the best way to get started because it gives you an opportunity to meet with and talk to a lot of people. And I think a shout out to Ginkgo Bioworks because of the way they had set up their booth, if you went to Ginkgo's booth, And it had two things that made you stay there. One was charging ports. Everybody's always looking for places to charge their phone. It happened to me a number of times once I knew Ginkgo had the table that had the charging ports. I spent a lot of time there. They gave you the opportunity to make a bracelet with these little tiny, almost microscopic beads that let you spell things out. So I made—
They weren't microscopic. They're just beads.
Okay, I know they were tiny, but they were tiny beads. They were tiny. So I made one for Kristen. It said Bio Art Babe, but it was fun to be around the people who were also making them. And it gave you a chance to just stand there with the Ginkgo people, hang out with someone, making a friendship bracelet, talk about it, and get to know each other. So I had a lot of fun doing that. Did you make a bracelet, Erum?
I did not get a chance to make a bracelet, but I received a bracelet. So Sarah Najad, formerly at New Lab, now she's been a professor at NYU in the biodesign space, and she made me one and said ATGC.
Nice.
That means we're best friends now because she gave me the bracelet, and I feel horrible because I didn't make one for her, but I'll give her something.
Well, she didn't give me one, so I feel horrible that we're not besties.
Oh. How many bracelets could she make? She was there for a conference. She wasn't there to make bracelets, but she made me one and I was so, so happy. But it was great. I mean, that conference was amazing. The Expo hall, I was able to meet some new companies. I'll just give a shout out to one company that I was fangirling, which was Sensory. So 3 women started this company to make SynBio scents, beautiful scents like oud, for example. That's the big one. They're planning on making oud, but they had a sample of a piece of oud, just so you can smell what oud actually smells like. And then they had another sample of a SynBio made one, and I smelled that, and it was very similar. And then there's one that they biologically generated, Bergmania, and it's like a nightshade, and it only releases scent at night. But they were able to find what that molecule is and able to make it, and it smelled so, so, so good. But what they're doing is it doesn't stop there. They're actually going to have plants engineered to emit these scents. So you can smell them from the basic house plants. I assume that's what they're using. They had these different plants that were there. They weren't engineered yet, but they were showcasing what these plants would be. I think scent is something that we haven't optimized for.
Yeah.
We see screens all the time. We're very visual people, especially in our hyper-tech, technocratic world that we live in. And then obviously for taste, there's a lot of foods that are very unique. But our sense of smell, there's a lot to be done there. And so I've been really thinking about that. When I met Gigi, Sarah, Claudia of Sensory, I was just floored. I had some hive mind there, and it was a rabbit hole that I was going down, and they're going down. And this is why conferences are great. You're able to meet people that will surprise you, meet like-minded people, and I really enjoyed meeting them.
The last session was about DeSci, which we featured on the podcast. And we've got a couple of episodes coming up that are about decentralized science and the funding of science through the blockchain or through cryptocurrency related things.
Yeah, I would just say that the last session being DeSci was a bit heavy. Yeah. Last year, it was this amazing performance with Drew Endy, Michael Spector, who we had on the pod, and Amit Best from The Mandalorian. And that was a great way to end the conference. This was a bit heavy. It was great.
Yeah, I walked away with a lot of notes.
Yeah. But
I was also ready. I know what you mean.
I wish it was a little bit lighter, of lighter content. Because, I get all my DeSci information from Michael Fisher from DeSci NYC. And it was great to rehear that, but not the last session. I wish it was something a little bit more magical. But it's okay. I'll put that in the suggestion box for next year.
Yeah. So next year, the conference is also going to be in San Jose. I think I said earlier, it was a really great location. I feel there's a lot of room to grow. I never felt crowded. So I'm looking forward to next year. Those who were there, I'd love to hear what you thought about it. And those who weren't there, I'd love to hear what you thought about it.
Yeah. And if you're going next year, definitely should go. If you're in the space at all, if you're curious, I'm excited to see what will be the theme. AI and biotech was kind of the big elephant in the room. I don't know if that's a way to say that. And I would love to see more companies, big, small, attend. We had a lot of representation of biotech beauty, which of course we love. Love to see more of that and some other consumer products, because when you are working with biology, the possibilities are endless. So who's making what? Let us know. If you want to go next year and just want to talk more about it, I think we gave you a lot of food for thought on this podcast, but we're happy to talk more. And stay tuned for the next episode. We're going to have another investor on our pod, Tony Kulesa of Pillar VC, another gem in the biotech industry. And so stay tuned for that.
All right, that's the pod.
Hi. A quick shout out to our sponsor, Messaging Lab, the force multiplier for biotech. Your biotech company is making the world a better place. You know that, we know that. But does the world? There's a big reason why some biotech companies attract investors, sign up customers, and get attention. That reason is strategic communications. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling narratives. And we have done that for the most successful biotech companies across healthcare, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice, visit messaginglab.com to explore how we can elevate your story and grow your business.